President Muhammadu Buhari presented the 2022 Appropriations Bill to the joint session of the National Assembly. 6 days after, the Senate has concluded debate on its general principles and referred it to the Senate Committee on Appropriations for scrutiny. The second-day debate witnessed more observations, expansion of rail lines, creation of more employment opportunities with the proposed loans, and improved legislative oversight on budgets by the National Assembly were some of the recommendations from senators.
Let me lend my own voice in this very important debate on the 2022 appropriation, which is aptly tagged Budget of Economic Growth and Sustainability. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, as apt as the theme of the budget is, our focus in understanding the fundamental principle at this stage is to say that we must look at those growth indicators, and in doing so also ensure that those projects or programs that have already started are allowed to continue on a trajectory that will tell us exactly where we are going to, which is the element of growth. Mr. President, along this line, I would like to indicate that the infrastructure program of government as currently being captured in the 2021 budget, and which we hope the 2022 budget will consolidate, focusing on road infrastructure, which in the last couple of months we have discussed a number of it. The truth of the matter is logistics, movements of goods and services along the corridors of our transportation nodes are very key to economic sustainability. And if we must reverse the economic trend we are having now, where we are having low productivity and growth, then we must consolidate on the road or transportation network, viz. The roads and the issue of the railway. Talking about railway, I would like to lend my voice to what distinguished Senator Ali said, that if you look at the railway network, the actual northwestern corridor has not been properly captured. And if you look at the northwestern corridor, you are talking about Sokoto, Kebbi, down to the northern part of Niger State. That area has not been properly captured, and there is need for us to take a look at that particular aspect. Because if you want to get anything sustainable, then whatever you put as the infrastructure, you must have the human capital that will be able to manage the infrastructure.
The resolve of this Ninth Senate to do things differently for the benefit of the entire Nigeria is being manifested in a number of ways. Also, the manner and the result of the recently concluded MTEF review meeting showed that the hope for Nigerian economic future and exit from League of Debtor country, if we can do things differently, is imminent. Mr. President, it is obvious that budget and its implementation is one of the strongest instruments that can be used to overcome the complex and hydra-headed challenges and problems confronting this country. Therefore, we should fast moving towards employing upcoming budget to deliberate and consensuous effort and steps towards addressing the problems of national interest. First and foremost of this step is the use of upcoming budget to address the issue of job creation. We are all living in a pseudo wet and borrowed economic fortune. Let each of the MDAs that is coming up for budget defense shows that their budget can create both direct and indirect jobs. That is, establishment can generate or support in terms of the upcoming budget. Secondly, we should be moving towards a balanced budget that cuts down on both domestic and external debt. I'm not opposed to borrowing to execute very critical budget activities, but a situation whereby we are borrowing and we cannot draw down over 70% of the borrowed money is nothing to write home about. Take audit of the previous borrowings and to make sure that the upcoming ones are being supported with evidence of capacity to draw down. A situation whereby we approve debt or borrowing for 2 years and less than 12% of the borrowing is drawn down is nothing to write home about. The whole country will be crying that we are borrowing, yet the bulk of this money is not drawn down and the country is going to pay.
Some may believe that we have capacity to generate more revenue than what is captured. I also want to commend the Committee on Finance for a job well done, but to urge that particular committee to strengthen their effort on oversight function to ensure that more GOC are captured. Mr. President, we discovered that most of the money goes to private pockets. Most of the agencies of government that were fully funded, they will come to National Assembly, they will get budget for capital, overhead, and all the rest. Yet the revenue generated by them are not limited to a consolidated fund of the Federation. Mr. President, this budget only captures 63 of such enterprise. But from our record, from what we witnessed during our engagement with them on Committee on Finance, we believe that we can still capture even more than additional 100 GOCs that are fully funded by the federal government, and they are getting revenue that goes to private pocket. Mr. President, I want to also urge the relevant committee of the Senate to go for their oversight functions, because most of even the constituency budget being given to senators and House of Rep members of this country are the only thing we feel in the constituencies. Yet, when contractors complete the job, they will not give them their money. They will not fund capital projects. It appears therefore that the old essence of budgeting is just to finance overhead. This particular Senate should make a difference to ensure that the good intention of Mr. President is put to bear for this budget to be realized.
The real issue here is that most of the assumptions that have been made here are actually good, some of them accurate, but some of them maybe just mere estimation. Some of the ideas that I would like to talk about have been discussed. The issue of infrastructure in particular, that is roads, network, and also the railway. I remember during the last budget, we agreed that there should be railway line from Kano to Katsina to maybe Kauranamo to Sabon Bini, from there to Sokoto to Kebbi. So I think we should do that because that will go a long way in helping our people. And then also, and in Niger also. So I believe this is very good. Then the other one is actually the issue of poverty reduction, in which about 510 billion has been earmarked. And it's my candid opinion that what we can do here is to provide permanent and pensionable employment, by employing Nigerians. And by the time we do that with 510 billion, that will actually employ 1,148 applicants in every state of the country. So I suppose that we should look at that issue, because for sure it is not working because the money is not reaching the people. Thank you.
I rise to speak on this budget and to commend Mr. President to say that this year's budget It's one budget that we'll remember for some of the achievements recorded by this administration in the area of infrastructure and palliatives towards improving the well-being of our people emanating from the global recession of the economy. There's no doubt that some remarkable achievements were made in improving our railway lines, roads, and aviation. Mr. President, for the 2022 budget, I want to equally add my voice to some of the remarks made by my colleagues about foreign loans. To me, Mr. President, the foreign loans in next year's budget, along with some of the palliatives that have been involved, are good. But the foreign loans, Mr. President, if they be geared towards wealth creation, employment opportunities, increased productivity, and better infrastructure facilities, I think it's going to be a welcome development. In essence, Mr. President, the foreign loans should be geared towards providing infrastructure facilities, job creation, and security. Mr. President, because time will not permit me to mention quite a number of the issues I have in mind, permit me to say, Mr. President, that one of the areas that I look forward to this government putting a lot of money in is in the completion of Iron and Steel Complex, which is capable of providing, according to a report of 1979, 68,000 engineers and technicians alone for the Iron and Steel Complex, Mr. President, and solid minerals. I think under your leadership, Mr. President, as the budget is before us, we should help the executive to draw their attention to critical areas of economic development. One of it, Mr. President, is that both our monetary and physical policies must be interwoven and interlocking together in order to improve the well-being of the people and generate wealth for our nation. Budgets must be aimed towards job creation, wealth creation. Mr. President, if you look at this year's budget, this 2022 budget, solid minerals, Mr. President, is receiving less than 5 billion naira. Mr. President, we must develop solid minerals. From Gobe to Osun to Kogi to Niger State to Nasarawa, our solid minerals are left undeveloped yet. Now that we are facing global economic recession, I think we should invest more in the solid minerals.
I want to join my colleagues in adding my voice to the contribution that is being made on the 2022 budget debate. Mr. President, sir, my concern revolves around three areas. One is lack of equity in the allocation or distribution of resources amongst geopolitical zones. This issue has been raised by Senator Aleru and Gobir as it relates to the extension and construction of rail line to some parts of Northwest geopolitical zone. Two, there is also a problem that has to do with budget discipline. Rollover of budgets for critical infrastructures has not been the norm. Instead, what is normally done year in, year out is introduction of new infrastructural projects, critical infrastructural projects like roads, rails. What needs to be done, Mr. President, emphasis should be more on rollover and completion of roads that have already started. So that is what needs to be done. Secondly, there is also the problem of oversight. Most of our committees, honestly, are not being very, very effective in their role of oversighting MDAs. For instance, there is need for the Appropriation Committee to be rendering quarterly report to this chamber so that this chamber will be able to appreciate the performance of annual budgets. When you look at the other parameters that has to do with the budget, a budget of 16.39 trillion, and with a capital allocation of 5.35 trillion, there is then a deficit of 6.26 trillion, constituting 38.19%. Now, sir, the capital component of the budget constitutes only 32%. If the deficit is 38.19% of the budget, it means part of the money that is going to be borrowed is going to be devoted to the current expenditure, which is not going to be helpful. The need for increased public-private partnership involvement in the improvement of infrastructural facilities in the country.
Mr. President, I just have two areas to make mention of. The first one is, if you look at the budget from 2015 to 2022 now, the problem we have, for me, is the exchange rate. The budget of 2016 of 6.08 trillion, which was equivalent to $30 billion at exchange rate of 197, and then you go down to maybe 2019 at an exchange rate of 306. Mr. President, if you interpolate this one on this budget with 2016 budget at 197, this budget will have been $83 billion. If you interpolate it with 306 as of 2019 budget, it will have been 53.56 billion. And that will be equivalent to 12 trillion only. 12 trillion only for this year. If it is in 2016, it will have been 7.87 trillion. So I think we have a problem. Our problem is perhaps relate with the central bank to come up with very strong monetary policies so we can maintain our exchange rate at least for a while, maybe 2 years or maybe 3 years. If that is not done, as long as the exchange rate Naira is diving down, the quantum of trillions in our budget will be increasing. And then deficit will also be increasing. And borrowing will also be increasing because they are all completely related. That is one. Number two, Mr. President, is the contention of infrastructure provision with deficit and borrowing. If you look at the budget from 2014 to 2022, you will observe a trend. Deficit, borrowing. Deficit, borrowing. And in often terms, the deficit is about equal to the capital budget provision. So it means if we don't borrow, we won't be able to implement capital projects. And so even in this year's budget, you will see that if we don't borrow, virtually all the capital projects cannot be implemented. And if the foreign partners we are expecting to give us money do not give us money, then we cannot implement capital projects. And capital project is the main essence of governance. Mr. President, having said this one, I want to suggest that government can go into public-private partnership with organizations as it is done in other advanced countries and bring infrastructure that can pay off itself in a number of years. Two, we can also, it was done before, oil for infrastructure, that can work. Finally, a question. Mr. President, we are borrowing all this amount of money. Why is River State not considered in the provision of infrastructure? Because at the time of payment, River State, being one of the major oil-producing states, will be part of the paying medium, and then we are not benefiting from these borrowed funds.
The President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria means well for our nation. But I think when you look at this budget of 2022, you still see that the recurring expenditure is greater than the capital expenditure. And I want to urge my colleagues in this place, because this budget will be sent to various committees. We have to take a look, have a very serious look at the recurring expenditures of each MDAs. Why is it that every year we have a ritual of buying computers, buying desks, buying biros? These are all consumables that do not produce the necessary needed way without for our people. And Mr. President, we are talking about how to grow our economy. How can we grow economy? Mr. President, remember in this very hollow chamber, I raised a motion that was aptly accepted by this hollow chamber about the moribund industries. How can we depend on a monolithic economy, just one side of economy, from oil without going to production? We should look at this budget that has been made for us by Mr. President. We should look at it thoroughly to ensure that we diverse our economy. We should diversify our economy, go into agriculture holistically, and not just on a lip say or using television to say we are growing our economy, we are growing agriculture. So we should look at our budget. Seriously, this budget should be rejected by the Senate to ensure that it reflects the yearnings and aspirations of Nigerians.
Borrowings and states that are not benefiting from those borrowings. When the government sent the list of states that would benefit from the monies that were to be borrowed, my state was excluded from that list. And yet, the repayment is going to be part of government revenue. Having said that, Mr. President, I'd like to debunk an argument that Nigeria is underborrowed. Nigeria is not underborrowed. Nigeria is the highest, 75%, 73% as at August of all our income is going into debt service. And Nigeria is 73, our 73 debt to revenue ratio, 73% debt to revenue ratio is the highest among African countries of our level, which is extremely high. We are the highest country in Africa in terms of debt service and revenue ratio. And we really need to watch that. And again, we are going into another budget with a very high deficit financing. It is good that the government has decided to bring the government-owned enterprises, GOEs, into the budget. But the challenge we are going to have with that is that because the power sector has continued to be a burden in our development, I don't see much we can achieve with that. And so, as we are borrowing these monies, which are meant to be used for capital development, for capital for capital expenditure, it is important that we actually make proper allocations to the power sector and give ourselves a target at the end of this year to know what the outcomes will be in terms of the power sector. Power sector just has to be focused on. Again, the president in his speech talked about bringing in the private sector into getting the private sector properly engaged in the process of budgeting. And we cannot do that without the power sector, because the power sector is really a big drain on all businesses in the country. Having said that, Mr. President, I would like to briefly talk about the issue I raised when we did the MTEF. The issue, we haven't seen the budget. We don't know whether there is a budget for under-recovery for the 6 months that is supposed to last, or whether there's a budget for the provision of frontier exploration.
I wish to commend the President for presenting this wonderful budget, especially at this moment that we are coming out of the COVID situation, the COVID pandemic. I think the budget outlook, as someone with an economic background, I think is a very good. The debt level of this country is still within a sustainable limit. And borrowing are meant to service investments. So I think we are in the right direction. When we borrow this money, we are going to invest it in strategic projects. And these projects, the multiplier effect of these projects is not only going to serve the politicians, but the entire country. If we have a very good railway network, it is the common man that will take the rail as a transportation means to where he's going to. And some of these major projects are spread all over the regions of Nigeria. We have the Niger Bridge in the southeast. We have the Ibadan-Lagos Expressway and the railway, the coastal railways coming up. the Lagos to Kano Railway, I think is well commendable. But one area that I've seen that we need to work on in order to also have this budget and not just rely on loans is the area of revenue generation. It is a major challenge, but the tax administrators need to work hard in order to devise means and ways that we can generate more revenue, and the tax administration framework need also to be looked into. And in so doing, they will be able to realize more payments of revenue, and also tax filing should be one thing that they should insist or make sure that it's happening in this country. A lot of people that are supposed to be paying their taxes, they don't. And you expect the government to handle everything, from health, education, transportation, and everything. So we need to also do our own part by paying our taxes. And then the areas of compliance that the FIRS need to look into, especially those that high net individuals. Property tax also need to be looked into, because most of the money today, if you look at Abuja, you see properties going everywhere. And we need to do something. On roads, I will appeal to these distinguished colleagues to look at the situation of roads from Jaba, Mokwa, Makera, Tagina, Birnin Gwari to Kaduna. That used to be a corridor that was the economy of this country. So when we come, I will appeal to the Works Committee to look at that road very seriously.
My own very short contribution actually will be to make an appeal to our colleagues in the National Assembly. It goes beyond ensuring, as we have done in the last 2 years, that the budget is timelessly passed. But beyond this is to ensure that no stone is left unturned in making sure that the budget is implemented to its letter. 2022 is going to be a crucial year. It's a year when members of the political class definitely will be busy preparing for elections and holding primaries. And it's important that we are all conscious of the fact that those who will implement this budget would want to assume, as it had happened in the past, that members of the National Assembly who are supposed to be in charge of oversight will be too busy, or at some point will be so lame duck as to be able to do a thorough supervision. So as we are getting ready to pass this budget, it's important that we all, again, remain conscious of the fact that we need to devote enough time to ensuring that there is proper and adequate oversight on the 2020 appropriation law implementation more than in the previous years.
Mr. President, I've gone through the budget. For me, it is well articulated, but there are worries in some areas. Like my colleague Sani Musa was talking. For me, I can propose that all new road constructions should be stopped, while federal road maintenance agencies should continue maintaining the existing roads, while the budgets of the new roads should be packed into railways. Because no matter how we do on roads, when we don't have railways, carrying all these haulages, all the roads spoils within 6 months. But when the railway lines take all our goods, the roads will be light and they will last long. I thank Mr. President for bringing in PPP. That's public-private partnership method of construction and agreement in Nigeria. This has served other countries. Now that he has brought it in, By the time we repair all our railways, the PPP will function. We cannot give out our roads for private sector when the roads are bad. We cannot sell our industries when the industries are bad. Yeah, I agree that when you buy an asset, you buy both the asset and liability. But you have to buy a liability that is not dead. So we need to look at it. My second worry is, I don't know whether it is real or right, but I saw it in television. Vice President saying we devalue our naira further. If we devalue our naira further, we pass 410 naira per dollar in MTF as exchange rate. If we devalue it further, even the statutory transfer is useless. The salaries of our workers are now useless. So we need to tell CBN not to listen to devaluing this naira as of today, so that all the things we pass, just 2 days, President presented his budget, we are talking of devaluing the naira. Please, Mr. President, I think this thing will affect us so much. Another area is the target given to FIRS, 16 trillion. With the situation of things, and we are talking of devaluation, FIRS cannot achieve that feat. Mr. President, I therefore submit that we have to look and work like professionals here. And next time they are preparing budget, may they please call what they call Conference of Construction Professionals to give them the actual cost of every road they want to put in budget. Otherwise, we are only doing proposals every year without achieving these roads and construction other items.
To commend the President for increasing funding to the health sector, particularly given the pandemic that we have. And this is reflecting in some of the infrastructure and services we are able to deliver. Just of recent, my committee, the Committee on Health, with my colleagues, we have been able to visit some hospitals across the country. And we have seen the investment that the sector obtained in 2020 and 2021 budget. This has improved our capacity to combat COVID-19, as well as our ability to be able to offer some services. However, as I said, it is not enough because Nigeria still needs more. We still need to be able to increase investment in that sector to reduce and eliminate Nigerians going abroad for tourism. And Mr. President, on the budget generally, just like several speakers have said, from my opinion, Nigeria has a revenue challenge, and we need as an arm of government to see how we work with the executive to address this. My short intervention will be that we have to look at some of the revenue policies that we have that is making us not to be able to generate enough. If you look at the budget across the last 3 years, we have not been able, the maximum we were able to do was in 2020 when we had 73% of our target revenue coming in. However, our debt servicing continues to increase. So I want us to look at the number of Nigerians in the tax net, particularly the high-worth people. We can't tax the majority of Nigerians are poor, but many of Nigerians that are rich, that have assets, that have money, they are not paying enough tax, and they are not even at all being captured appropriately. We need to tax our revenue agencies to do this better. We need to review waivers and tax holidays that we give to some of the companies. Yes, we did that in the COVID, but we have to look at it because we are not getting enough to, into the cover. Also, the DOEs and even several other government agencies that generate revenue, the National Assembly will have to perform our oversight effectively to be able to see that revenue generated for government is appropriately remitted and is appropriately calculated. Several agencies manipulate expenditure to be able to reduce what they put there. Finally, Mr. President, it is good for us to take a loan to build infrastructure. But I will round up. We have to think about management of these infrastructures. Otherwise, by the time payments are being done by generations coming, the infrastructure will depreciate. So we need to think of a public-private sector in terms of building infrastructures and managing them.
Let me commend your very good efforts. I want to talk about the opaque operation of service-wide votes. Mr. President, for some time now, one has observed that the disbursement from service-wide votes really have not been too open to the standing committees of the Senate. That has been very open to the appropriation committee of the Senate. Mr. President, we might just be reminded what service-wide vote makes, which is a budget that is put in a basket to meet the shortfalls, unanticipated shortfalls
in recurrent and capital expenditures. Mr. President, in 2021, the service-wide votes, what was there was 758 billion. And in 2022, from MTEF and FSP adjustment that we made, the projection was that extra 510 billion were going to be added to what is the earmark for 2022. Mr. President, this is a huge sum of money. We know it too that all NDAs and other personals of government go for certain approvals for them to be able to meet with this expenditure. But after they are expended, that is where it stops. When these agencies come for budget appraisal or budget performance before their standing committees, they don't disclose whatever is released to them for service-wide vote. This has been the practice. And I think it is very wrong to have such huge sums of money earmarked for service-wide votes, and at the end of the day, all the use of such money that are shrouded in secrecy. I think it's unacceptable to any parliament in the world. Therefore, I am asking that, Mr. President, that any disbursement that is made henceforth from service-wide vote, because on the expenditure side, it must be disclosed to the standing committees and appropriation so that they can compartmentalize this spending, or this expenditure accordingly. If you go to page 5, item number 22 of the President's speech, budget speech, he said that as of July 2021, 6.79 trillion had been used, that is on the expenditure side, out of which 4.17 was on the deficit, and this deficit was financed through domestic borrowing, which means some of this money that we are spending on service-wide votes, if it's on the current side, to meet shortfalls in recurrent supplementation, it is important that those expenditures must be properly captured. Because we have said that all our borrowings that we are doing is supposed to be used to meet capital shortfall in capital expenditure for rebuilding of our own infrastructure. Therefore, I think it is important all disbursement from service-wide votes must be declared so that we know exactly what we are borrowing is properly being used, for the purpose, which is meeting with shortfalls in capital expenditure. Finally, Mr. President, I want to mention my state, Edo State, and in particular, my senatorial district. There is one road that has been an albatross for years, the Benin Abraka Road. Mr. President, I am calling on the executive and all the agencies that are so concerned to please look at Benin Abraka Road.
The Nigerian government must stop borrowing. We should cut our quotes according to our resources. There's no rush in doing all the projects at the same time. Whatever specific project we are going to do, we should have the money down and finish it on time. Imagine all the roads I've been doing, particularly Ibadan Express Road, since the time of Obasanjo. We have not been able to finish it, and we continue to allocate money every year. This time around, whatever leftover projects we are going to do is what the government should be able to conclude before the exit of this administration. We have already borrowed a lot of money, and the National Assembly has cooperated a lot with the government. Again, in Agric, a lot of smugglings are going on, which thereby killing agricultural initiative of the same government. My own take is very simple. Let the government overhaul the revenue agencies. Within a month or two, you see all the targets that we'll be able to gather a lot of funds to prosecute our project. With this and all others, I submit that this, both mineral resources, solid minerals, we have not gone anywhere. The steel industry we have been prosecuting since Sagari's time has not gone anywhere. Therefore, the government must face
specific project that we can finish before the expiration of his time.
For an economy like ours that is just getting out of recession, your capacity to continue to, stay above waters will just be backed by your ability to continue to generate revenue. So looking at the 2022 budget, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, first I must commend the revenue posture of the 2022 budget for three main reasons. Number one, I think that the encouragement in terms of the increase or the enhancement from the projected amount in 2021 is encouraging. I mean, you have a budget of 10 trillion, which is almost 25% of the projected budget for last year. Equally important is the fact that in this particular budget projection, the reliance on oil is also reduced. You have about 35% component deriving from oil revenue, while the balance of 65 is from non-oil. And also commendable is also the fact that this particular budget too is also bringing about fiscal transparency and accountability, in the sense that you have almost about 63 government-owned enterprises whose budget have also been integrated in this current budget. But having said that, Mr. President, I think it's also important to also try to express some of the concerns that I think we need to be very careful about. Number one is the actual performance of our budget year on year. If we look at the trend, it hasn't been that encouraging. In 2019, we had about 65%, while in 2020, 73%. This year, if you look at it from the May performance, we are almost at about 56%. Now, why this is important is because of what my other colleagues have also been talking about, which has to do with the debt service. As the actual performance drops, the ability to service debt will also be a major issue. And for emphasis, it is important to let us know that in 2020, the debt service ratio, debt service to revenue was about 85%, while the current year is about 90%. So I think that we need to address our revenue challenge. And part of the suggestions that I would like to bring will be that, most of the investment in the infrastructural development and the capacity in human development that we are building, we must also try and entrench our tax revenue capacity to also bring in more revenues to government. In fact, the tax credit and the tax concessions, just like my former colleagues had mentioned, I think we need to look to review them for efficiency and value.
My major concern on this budget is on the capital side of it. And when you look at capital figure of 5.35 trillion, it looks big. But the fact of it is that most expenditure on capital projects are dollarized. And by the time you do a conversion into dollars, we'll be talking of a meager $10 billion. Compare with what is obtainable, you will discover that $10 billion over a 200 million population is nothing to write home about. And mostly, this capital expenditure is being financed through borrowing. Borrowing on its own, there's nothing bad in it. But I still feel that we must look for alternative options of financing our budget. In particular, I discovered that there are a lot of debt assets in Nigeria. A lot of assets that have been built over time by federal government, and they are lying value now without putting them into use. In particular, I will want to refer to building assets, dotting everywhere, especially in city of Lagos. We have Independence Building. We have former National Assembly Complex, NICOM Building, NITE, Old Defense, and a lot of buildings. I feel that the federal government should dispose these buildings to be able to make money to finance our capital expenditure.
In contributing to this all-important debate, I'd like to commend the budget proposal because it's an upward trajectory of the previous year's budget. But I want to dwell on a particular sector, the health sector. From the figures before us, we have a proposal for 462 billion and some fraction for recurrent expenditure and 116 billion for capital expenditure for the health sector. I think this is grossly inadequate. Looking at even the Abuja Declaration in April 2001, where African countries met and agreed that 15% of our budgetary provisions should be for the health sector. I think that this is grossly inadequate. A situation where we walk into our health facilities and we don't have basic health equipment. Even people who have issues, basic issues, comorbidities, cannot have basic equipments like sphygmomanometers and other equipment, MRI scans, CT scans. These are things that are indispensable in our health sector. And we know that the doctors cannot physically look at a human being and diagnose what is wrong with the person. On that note, I want to appeal to this Senate that we should look at the health sector and provide more funds for the health sector to add more value to it.
I want to thank Mr. President for presenting this very great budget. The country, as a nation, Nigeria, we have to thank God because we have all the resources, human and material, to make us, happy to a certain level. Another thing, Mr. President, I want us to understand is the budget is there, implementation is another thing. And implementation, Mr. President, I want us to know that lots of things are involved. When corruption comes in, that's where the whole thing fails. When you get the right persons at the right place, then you are already a winner. Mr. President, with that, I want to plead that we get the right persons and we have to put them on check. If not, for sure, we'll go back to square one. In doing that, Mr. President, I want also to suggest that the roads from Abuja to Jos Gombe through Bauchi are terribly bad. And if that is not checked, because from here to Jos, unlike other states where you have flights 2-3 times a week, from here to Jos, sometimes in the week there's no flight. And the roads are completely down. I'm pleading that that area should be looked into, which is very important. Another thing I want us to look into, Mr. President, is the NDLEA we are looking at. We're talking of the future. And the future has to do with the present generation, the youth. The budget being sent or being passed or being given to NDLEA, as I look at it, is inadequate. When you're talking of 3 billion to NDLEA for the whole nation, we have to look into it and plead, Mr. President. With that, I raise my case. Thank you, Mr. President.
Some priority projects, such as the rail transportation sector that has the capacity to reduce pressure on the roads, such as the power projects that is critical to the economy, and also the roads infrastructure. Unfortunately, the power sector, a project I consider the game changer in this sector, the Mandela hydroelectric power project, has remained on paper for long. I heard about this project for the first time during the regime of President Shehu Shagari, when an engineer, Salihi Ilyasu, published an article in the New Nigerian justifying the need for this project. Ever since, it has remained on paper. We are paying just lip service to this project. On roads, Mr. President, the bulk of the amounts budgeted for roads are channeled to just a few projects, year in, year out. Lagos, Ibadan Expressway, Apapa Oronshoki Expressway, Abuja, Kano Expressway. What about other critical roads in the country? Mr. President, my main concern about this budget is the fact that, as many of my colleagues have said, the level of deficit is very high, warranting borrowing to fund the gap. Mr. President, I would suggest a simple solution to this. When this administration came on board, one of the cardinal objectives they say they will address is tackling corruption. We have, in the press, in the media, many cases of corruptions amounting to billions and trillions of naira that have not been pursued diligently. If we were to pursue these cases diligently, we will recover enough money to fund the deficit in this budget. I will mention just a few cases. It has been reported in the media that the forensic audit of NDDC has exposed 6 trillion naira that have been looted in this agency. We have also read that the pension fraud cases have now hit 157 billion naira. We have also read that one former MD of PPMC has defrauded the agency to the tune of $3 billion US. We have also heard or read about Nimasa, where 1.5 trillion naira and 9 billion naira has been traced to the personal account of a former boss of that agency. If you now look into the proposal or the approval to buy a 20% stake in Dangote refinery to the tune of 2.7 billion US, you will know that we have enough money that we can harness and reduce the level of borrowing. So I urge Mr. President to look at this direction, to face the fight against corruption seriously so that we can recover money and stop this borrowing. Thank you.
Truly speaking, the government has tried in the area of infrastructure development, but more needs to be done. If you look around Nigeria, there are so many abandoned industries everywhere, ailing industries. And there are a lot of Nigerian industrialists whom, if the federal government will offer them a lease agreement, simple lease agreement, and tell them to take over those industries and own them as long as they have at least 25 to 30% capacity production, I believe that a lot can be done for us to drive the Nigerian economy back. I also think that, yes, we have to borrow, but we should think about a PPP model and concessioning of infrastructures and industries so that we can reduce borrowing while growing infrastructure. I also believe that the Senate, if we can look in and do proper oversight on all the government-owned enterprises, that we might bring in better yield. If there's anything we can do as a Senate to encourage the executive to do whatever it takes to stabilize the exchange rate and to see what we can do to encourage CBN reserves that was always paid in by the NNPC that had been stopped. If we can encourage that $3 billion monthly to avoid inflation and to avoid strain so that we won't be scammering for foreign exchange every month. We can also reduce the rates at which Nigerians relocate their family while staying back here struggling for this scarce foreign exchange to pay for their family upkeep. If there's anything we can do in the area of education to make our people, not to send our people out to Ghana, to Canada and other areas, so that Nigerians can stay in and reduce the rate of struggling for foreign exchange to pay for mortgages and other things abroad. I also think that we can encourage the executive to insist on made in Nigerian goods, made in Nigerian cars, parts, tires, food, and drinks. By so doing, we'll encourage our international trade and the ability to earn foreign exchange.
We should focus on diversifying the economy with robust MSME growth, investing in critical infrastructure, strengthening security, and ensuring good governance, enabling a vibrant, educated, and healthy populace, reducing poverty, and minimizing regional economic and social disparities. However, the country has wasted much of its opportunities to break away from underdevelopment, despite its massive natural and human resources endowments, by dwelling so much on crude oil resources as the major source of revenue, thereby driving a monolithic economy for years in spite of the enormous developmental challenges it faces. The dependence of Nigeria on crude oil to grow the economy has brought nothing rather than misery to the generality of the population. As a matter of priority, what the government needs now is a complete shift or diversification, which is believed to be the only viable option to survive the current environment of global economic uncertainty. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, permit me to say that an investment in agriculture at this stage is very critical. It is not only going to avert the possibility of hunger and famine, it will be a gateway to revitalizing our traumatized economy. The agricultural industry, if highly diversified, will lead to an abundance of opportunities to build the economy and enhance the standard of living of millions of our people. Finally, Mr. President, it is my considered opinion that government should vigorously pursue the non-debt option of PPP because of our large size, both in land mass and population. Virtually all our roads, our waterways, and railway are very viable vehicles for private-public partnership. We should do away from the present penchant of awarding contracts and embrace the PPP model, because that is the only way we can survive without necessarily going and borrowing all the time.
I thank Mr. President for being timers in the presentation of this 2022 budget proposal to the National Assembly. Having said that much, Mr. President, I will go straight to the issues that as it concerns my constituency in this budget, which Mr. President himself claimed that the 2022 budget will be the last full-year budget to be implemented by this administration. And having stated so, that is the last, the main one that they can do full these issues in as it concerns my constituency becomes very, very important. Number one is the Nsukka Mkpologu Adani Road. This is the road that connects to two states, Anambra and Kogi. And this is where you have the food belt of Enugu State and the southeast, as case may be. So this road is very, very important, and we want this budget to address it so that things can work well for our people. The other issue is the 9th Mile Makurdi Expressway. My constituency is the gateway to the whole northern region, to the southeast and south-south. So this road is very, very important. Government has agreed that it's going to dualize it. I want something to be done urgently towards that direction, because there is lack of funding for this project consistently for the past two budget cycles. The other issue is 9th Mile OP Road. It's an old road that the Federal Ministry of Works commenced, but due to lack of funds, it's not moving. So we want a change of things towards that direction. The other one is, as a Southeasterner, I have to talk about River Niger Bridge. Mr. President named it in the budget and said he's going to do something to ensure that he commissions that bridge. We are looking forward to that. It will make things easy for our people who are businessmen, crisscrossing all parts of the country. The other one is Enugu-Onitsha Road. Mr. President, Enugu-Onitsha Road is very, very important. Today, you spend 6 hours to move from Onitsha to Enugu. That has never been the case. We want a change of things to make sure that things work. The other one is the 2.5 billion Adada River Dam that will supply my senatorial district with water. Major challenge of my constituency is water. We have problem with water. And this dam is for 10 years now. Nothing has gone to that. We want a change of heart to make sure that things work out well for us. The other one is the Obola for Ehamufu Road that links us to the Federal College of Education, Ehamufu. We want something urgently to be done in that direction. The other one is Ada and the farms, Ada rice farms. That is the main focus and the main revenue generation in terms of agriculture and employment creation for our people. That place has not gotten the attention it deserves from the Federal Ministry of Water Resources. We want a change of heart in that. The rail line infrastructure. We have that most of the roads we are doing in this country is not working because of the trucking on that road. We want a change that we go to rail line transportation. I'm begging that we look at the employment creation to make things done. Then the other issue, finally, major driver of revenue generation in the country. If we can put a committee to look at the revenue generation that will come from the solid mineral as a non-oil generation for the country, we will reduce the mobile.
I want to join my colleagues who have seen this budget as very beautiful. Also to ascribe to their characterization of the budget as an annual ritual. Mr. President, looking at the figures that have been churned out, I want to think that like 2021, implementation will still become the problem of this budget. Mr. President, year in, year out, we talk about infrastructural development and allocations of infrastructures. Yet, year in, year out, we cry here about deficits in infrastructural development. Mr. President, in the past few weeks, people have complained across the country about bad roads. Mr. President, Benue South Senatorial District is not an exception. We have a 7-kilometer internal road in Otukpo that has been begging for construction but has been in the budget year in, year out. Mr. President, we have the Makurdi Aliede Otukpo Road that is literally a death trap. Mr. President, for 2 decades now, the Otukpo Oju Road to Yahe in Cross River State have been a perennial cry of our people for something to be done, yet nothing is done about it. So, Mr. President, I think that what we need to do here is to change our strategies towards budget presentation and budget implementation. We must try as much as possible to plug the leakages in our economy so that we can conserve funds for the development of our infrastructures. I don't know the place of education in this budget, yet we want to enthrone a vibrant population in our country. Mr. President, poverty is on the rise.
Like I said last year, and I want to repeat here, we must change our budget system. The envelope system is a system that duplicates and continues to do one thing all over and over and over, and will not expect a new result. And that is why, Mr. President, I want to say finally that according to David Easton, we cannot be doing the same thing over and over, the same ways, and expect a different result. So we must change our implementation strategy and our budget system so that Nigeria can benefit from this annual ritual called budget.
I rise to lay a complaint the way Federal Ministry of Works and Housing sharing their funds in which is not proper, especially to us that comes from far north. Mr. President, if you take a look at the budget, they released about almost 5 trillion to capital projects. Unfortunately, I don't know what northern part of the country is benefiting from that capital project. Take a look at the road. When we go to the actual road from Abuja, Kaduna, Zaria to Kano, up to now, the road is not going. And I don't understand why. Please, I need Senate to investigate what is going on. That is one. Secondly, we have a road project in Jigawa State leading from Konandumawa, Barbara to Niger Republic. That project is about 19.7 trillion. What the ministry released was only 300 million. So I'm highly surprised. I don't know where they are sharing their money to, because most of the funds, they don't release it to our roads in northern part of the country, especially north central, northwest, and also northeast. If you take a look at the road project there, the ratio of the road project is very, very low. So I want Senate to kindly intervene. If not, we will not understand what is going on. So I so submit, Mr. President.
Mr. President, first I want to commend the efforts of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for his diversification efforts, diversification away from oil. People have projected that oil will remain a major source of energy for a very long time. But that, we should not be swayed by that. Because I want to believe that a lot of efforts too are going out there in terms of alternative energy sources. So going into all forms of diversification is very, very important for now and our future. We should also be very mindful of the ecological issues associated with oil drilling. And that again means that we should try as much as possible to move away from oil into other forms of ventures, in particular agriculture. Nigeria has arable lands all over the place, and these lands remain untapped. I want to encourage that we should do the best we can to go into as much of mechanized agriculture as possible and give all forms of incentives to those who are willing to go into that area. Then the issue of solid minerals, in particular Ajakuta steel, to me is very, very important. We also have Itakwe iron ore, we have Oshogbo iron ore, we have Katsina iron ore, or rolling mill. All these mills, rolling mills, we need to encourage their exploitation so as to meet our internal needs and also export whatever we get by way of surplus. Then, Mr. President, sir, we also need to address the issue of revenue leakages. We need to be very conscious of these revenue leakages and come up with more conscious efforts, to stem the rate of leakages of our revenues. And this will go a long way into minimizing our rate of borrowing. Mr. President, I want to believe that there is a need to institute all forms of sanctions to act as deterrent to these government agencies that have persistently refused to remit revenues that is due to the federal government. We have done a lot of work in Finance Committee by way of investigative hearing, but I want to believe that we don't even have to continue with that, because we don't need to remind these agencies to do what they are supposed to be doing. So there should be all forms of sanctions so that they should be able to do what they are supposed to do. We don't have to prompt them. We don't have to prompt them. We spend a lot of time, energy prompting these people to pay. It shouldn't be so. There should be all forms of sanctions to act as deterrent to erring government agencies. On the whole, Mr. President, I want to commend the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for this budget. I want to believe that if properly and timely implemented, Nigeria will move a step forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, distinguished. Well, apparently we have come to the end of the debate, the second reading on the 2022 appropriation bill presented by Mr. President last week. Let me thank all those distinguished senators who made their contributions. And I want to join all those that have commended Mr. President for presenting the Appropriation Bill 2022 in good time. This is one of the very important reasons why we are able to have sufficient time to consider the budget, the appropriation bill, before 2022 appropriation bill was presented, this 2020 and 2021. Let me also commend all distinguished senators for the sacrifice in processing, consideration, and passage of the 2020 and 2021 Appropriation Acts. That devotion and commitment and dedication certainly saw us succeed in passing the previous bills. I'm sure that we are ready to repeat the feat of passing the Appropriation Bill 2022 before the end of December. Distinguished colleagues, I agree completely with those of us who raised the issue of revenue generation, collection, and remittances to the coffers of the federal government. The agencies that are supposed to collect and remit revenues would have to be tasked, and this 2022 appropriation bill shows that we have over 400 billion coming especially from these agencies as additional revenues. We need to do better. We need to do more. Government agencies must remit revenues that they generate. We need to also invest in our people, education for our youth particularly, and of course, health. Distinguished colleagues, borrowing, like most of us here said, is not bad. What we need to do is to ensure that what we borrow is prudently deployed in those areas of capital infrastructural developments. Distinguished colleagues, the 2 or 3 committees that are oil-related, petroleum upstream, petroleum downstream, and gas, need to be very, very alert to the implementation of the Petroleum Industry Act. This is very important because this act that we passed here is to transform the petroleum industry. And at this formative age of the transformation, there is need for us to be very vigilant and oversight very closely to ensure that the taking off is successful. Our oversight as committees must be very purposeful and at all times for the sole reason of ensuring that government funds are properly and prudently applied to the projects appropriated for. Finally, I want to commend the entire National Assembly for ensuring that the previous budgets were passed in good time, and of course, the assent was also the same. The budget was 100%. Today, the implementation of the 2021 is about 60%. We want to see a repeat of the 2020 implementation so that we also have 100% at the end of the day in December. This is very important because we know that Nigeria came out of recession and in fact achieved a GDP growth of over 5% because of the implementation of the 2020 funds appropriated. And the repeat, of course, will be to reinforce what we have been able to achieve before. I want to, at this point, also mention that our committees will start the budget defense from Monday, and like we did before, our committees, we must remain very critical of the proposals presented to us by the executive arm of government. We must ensure equity in the distribution of projects. We must ensure economy in the application of funds. We must question any possible overpricing of items. And we should be able to, at the end of the day, have a budget that covers the interest of all the communities that we have in this country and all parts of the country. Having said this, I want to call on the leader.
Having concluded the debate on the 2022 appropriation bill as submitted by Mr. President on the 7th of October 2021, I would want to, for the approval, the second reading of this bill for the approval of the Senate. I so move.
Thank you, Mr. President. I so second the motion as moved.
For the second time, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
A bill for an act to authorize the issuance of from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation the total sum of 16,391,023,917,002 naira only, of which 768,276,616,043 naira only is for statutory transfers. 3,901,952,981,550 naira only is for debt services. 6,829,015,983,446 naira only is for recurrent non-debt expenditure, while the sum of 4,891,778,836,644 naira only for contribution to the development fund for capital expenditure for the year ending on the 31st December 2022 and for other matters connected thereto 2021 SB 829 second reading.
Bill for an act to authorize the issuance from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation the total sum of 16,391,23,917,692 naira only, of which 768,276,616,043 naira only is for statutory transfers. 3,901,952,981,550 naira only is for debt service. 6,829,015,483,446 naira only is for recurrent non-debt expenditure, while the sum of 4,891,778,836,644 778,836,654 naira only for contribution to the development fund for capital expenditure for the year ending on the 31st day of December 2022 and for other matters connected there to 2021, second reading taken, and the bill is referred to the Committee on Appropriations to report back within 4 weeks.
And after that debate, the bill was passed for second reading and referred to the Senate Committee on Appropriations. It's at this point in time that we'll round off this program for today. I am Ignatius Nkwo. Enjoy the rest of our programs.
nje corona ka dịkwa n'obodo.
Ikwechisiri ike na ị gaghị eso anyị egwu ọzọ. Ekụzili ya na-atọ ọchị. Ihe niile alaghachila azụ n'etu ọ dị na mbụ.
Mana ndị mmadụ ka na-arịa ọrịa ebe ndị ụfọdụ na-anwụkwa site n'ọrịa corona.
Ihe Lara na-ekwu bụ eziokwu.
Gịnị ka anyị ga-eme? Anyị ga-eji ncha na mmiri na-agba agba na-asa aka anyị mgbe niile ihe dị ka ntabiri anya 20. N'inye anyị aka icheta, anyị ga-ekwere enyi anyị na-anaghị ahụ anya ụkwa ncheta ụbọchị ọmụmụ. Mgbe ọbụla anyị nọ n'ezi, anyị ga-enye onye nọ n'akụkụ ohere ihe dị ka feet 6. Anyị ga-ekpu mkpu ihu mgbe ọbụla anyị nọ n'ezi. Ma ọ bụrụ na ị ga-akwa ụkwara ma ọ bụ ma uzere, were ịkara aka gị kpuchie imi gị na ọnụ gị ma ọ bụ wee ụfụfụ kpuchie imi gị na ọnụ gị ma mgbe ị mechara tụfuo ya ebe o kwesịrị. N'ọdị n'ụlọ ya ọ bụ na onwe gị ihe bara uru ị ga-apụta n'ezi imi.
Mana ọ na-agwụ ike ịnọ n'ime ụlọ ụbọchị niile. Nke a adịghị mma.
Kanayo, kedu ka ọ ga-adị ime ije buru nje corona ebe na-egwu egwuregwu n'ezi? Bunye nne gị, bunye nna gị, ya na ụmụnne gị.
Ikwuru eziokwu Lara, nke a ekwesịghị.
Ụmụ ibe m, ka anyị jikọta aka ọnụ bido otu a na-akpọ Operation Chụpụ Coronavirus. Anyị ga na-eme ihe niile gọọmenti nyere n'iwu, na-eme ka ndị niile nọ n'akụkụ anyị mekwa etu ahụ.
Ekwere m na nke a.
Lights, camera, action. Pictures are created in accordance with the creative vision of the photographer. The ability of a photographer to express perceptions and emotions in order to convey an impression connotes the art of photography. Most photographic works show aesthetic qualities. Some create an illusion, while some abstract photos may paint a deeper meaning from the ordinary. All this depicts the creativity of this artistry. In the early decades of the 19th century, photography captured more detail and information than the traditional methods of replication, like painting and sculpture. Today, photography still remains a unique art form that demands creative thinking from the photographer. We all love taking pictures, but there's a whole lot that goes into making our pictures look flawless. In this artistry, every detail counts.
I'd usually like to start with one light and then improve my lighting style up to the point when I get the kind of picture I want to shoot. So I'll start with this. This is always called the main light, and I'm going to start the main light on camera right. Okay, fine. So the next thing I need to do now is to position her. I like you to sit down, look towards this light. You can put 1 foot up, 1 foot down, make yourself relax. Come to the edge of the stool. Good. Fine. Are you relaxed enough? All right, so just smile, and let's see how this goes. Fantastic. So with every shot I take, I begin to readjust my camera till I achieve what I want to see. So right now, there's too much lighting coming on her face, so I'm going to have to work on my lighting style and try it again. And, well, it looks much better this time around. This is one light setup, and when I took the first light, there was too much light, I had to adjust my settings. And she looks more like this now.
New technological trends in digital photography have opened a new direction in full-spectrum photography, where careful filtering choices across the ultraviolet lead to new artistic visions. This art entails careful staging and lighting of the picture.
I'm going to make it very simple, so I'm going to just add one more light, and then I'm done. This light I'm adding is called a hair light or a rim light. It allows the picture to have a form, and so I can see her in a beautiful place. Beautiful. You see the picture has changed again. You notice there's a rim light now that has created a form. When you look at the first one, it was bare, and the second one has some form of rim between it. And then from here, we go into post-production and print. So this is the picture, and it comes in two formats. It comes as a JPEG, which is a camera processed option, and it comes as a RAW version, which is the original version with the camera shot the picture. So I'm going to edit this in RAW right now. So I start with this. Good, so the picture is out now, and I start to work on it. Luckily, she has a very fresh face, which is an advantage. So I may not do as much. I just have to work on the colors of her dress, her lips, make her hair look beautiful. I'm going to paint her up in lights and shadows now. I'm putting a bit of darkness to her face.
The stages of photograph has evolved over the years. In amateur processing, the film is removed from the camera and wound onto a reel in a dark room. But technology has taken a new dimension in this artistry.
Technology has overtaken all of that now. Makes it easier for a lot of people, makes it more accessible for a lot of people. Back in the days, they had a few labs that did darkroom cleaning, washing as it was known in the day. But today we have a download, edit, upload, and print very, very quickly. And then you can see how far we have gone in the last few minutes. So this is the original picture. And then this is the Photoshop picture. The colors have changed. She has a red look initially. Now it's looking more like her skin tone. The dress is bluer, which is making more. And then you see her hairline. I've defined her hairline more. And then you see the little imperfections we had initially have been removed to give us a, so to speak, final finish. We're good to print. I'm viewing the image right now, and I'm going to send to this little printer here, which does my emergency prints. Beautiful, and she's ready to go.
After so much skill and time spent, the end result is indeed worth it. Or what do you think?
I never get this kind of thing, or I hear it.
There was this broadcast on Villa Updates, which I'm part of, and I got the information there that we should apply for survivor fund.
I thought it was a scam, but truly it wasn't a scam.
To my great surprise, we actually got a lot of 30,000. I have 5 staff, including the making 6. We got a lot of 30,000. Like 3 weeks later, this is the first time I'm getting anything from this government. Even from past governments, I have never gotten anything from them.
It was a great relief for us because during the COVID-19, things were so tough.
I really thank the government for this great gesture because it has helped a lot.